the industry right now?
Thank you, Brian, for having me. The real estate industry is robust, as you put it correctly. As you know, everything is premised on land. Talk about, the resources that we invest. I mean, everything is invested on land, and being a major factor of production, then real estate comes into play, and how well we manage that estate, of course, determines whether our productivity is going to be positive or not. Mm-hmm. So I mean, real estate industry, this is a field I have been for the last better part of my life. And this is what I do every day. Mm-hmm. Yes, I interact with professionals in real estate, of course regulated, as you've mentioned, by EARB, the Estate Agents Regulatory Board, a body that regulates how we interact in real estate, how we interacting with other players, be they the landlords, the owners of those properties, be they other agents, how we interact with them, and then the body comes into play. And it is quite a robust body, has been there, very well led, holding annual conferences and dictating, of course, how we run. I'll tell you, we are regulated to the core. Mm-hmm. The body regulates how much we charge our fees, how we interact with amongst ourselves as agents, how we interact with other stakeholders in the market. And there's a disciplinary committee. If we go wrong, then we are disciplined. So yes, O'Brien, that is the industry I am in. Mm-hmm. Yes.
And when you look at it currently, what would you say are the biggest challenges facing this industry?
Other than the economics, that's affecting every other sector, I think the industry has, been really affected by what, has been happening for the last 1+ years, which is the digitization of the sector, where the registry, for instance, is digitized, and the access in processing of data and such is controlled. And I'll tell you, that has been a major challenge. Mm. And businesses, sometimes have been unable to perform because of the low speed at which, that information can be processed. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So when you talk about, the automation of, the lands registry, and this is, of course, a move in the right direction, because we have had a situation whereby, the manual land registry, has been manipulated by unscrupulous land officials, to issue fake title deeds and allotment letters and so much. But of course, we know that this has been an exercise that has been going on for the last 5 years. So where is the challenge in the automation of the land registry?
Well, Brian, the process, first of all, was, by and large, a political process. Mm-hmm. Because it is in the interest of the government of the day that proper adjudication of land is done, that proper transactions involving real estate are done. So what's the goodwill? And when we have a change in governance, does that affect the process? And I will tell you, yes, it affects. So the challenge has been putting together, and I would want to think that it might have been that we bit so much that we were unable to chew. Mm-hmm. We possibly would have gone in smaller phases, so that then we are able to automate this process. And I agree with you totally that this is the way to go. This is the way to go. But when you are doing a changeover, mm-hmm. do you close a system, in this case the manual registry, before you open the other? The phasing out of the manual registry possibly would have been a bit smoother if the two ran together for quite some time before the closing of the manual and opening of the automated registry. But I can't agree with you more that this is a process that needed to have happened 10 years ago, before all this, malpractices in the industry happened.
We have also seen the launch of the digital registry, which has been credited with, the fast turnaround when it comes to issues like searching of title deeds, green cards, and so much. Has this really been of help to the industry?
Definitely yes. Any automation, while properly handled, of course increases efficiency and transparency, and that has happened. We have experienced the speed at which these documents can now be processed is higher and well improved. I'll tell you, when it was manual, it was possible to manipulate the search, for instance. Now it is not possible. Before you search my parcel of land, I have to okay it, because I'll be alerted before you go ahead. That was not happening in the manual registry, so it has helped the industry. Other than the hitches that came, and I'll tell you those are the teething problems. Other than those hitches, this was the right direction to be taken, and it is now working. Yes.
You see, this digitalization process, is a child of the National Land Policy, which came into force in 2009, which, among other things, talk about digitization, in a bid to streamline the land industry in this country, which has been plagued by so many challenges, and you have just mentioned some of them. Is the manipulation, of title deeds, collusion of lands officials with brokers to alter demarcations, and so it has been dragging on. Of course, there has been court cases, there has been financial challenges, but in terms of, if you have to look at this now whole system and talk about the now digitalization, what percentage of the land system has been digitalized?
The process went in phases, and we started in Nairobi. There are still some counties that haven't heard of digitalization. We're still manual. But Nairobi, which would be referred as the central and the main, is coming up well. I wouldn't want to really speak of the body, but as a player in the industry, when I find the searches are now happening and they are taking a shorter period, and not just that they are correct, and many of them are happening, then I know that a good percentage of digitalization has happened. But as I said, that is Nairobi. In other parts of the country, the same hasn't happened. And I'll tell you, Brian, land administration and management is a big issue, and it is very, very central. And very, a very emotive subject, knowing that all my parcels of land, that I know all your parcels of land, that you can value, what I own as land, is a very emotive subject. But the process is ongoing. At one point, we'll be 100%. We possibly are just around 70%. And counting.
Yes, 70% and counting. And when you look at, the 30%, which is yet to be digitalized, would you say this is, the critical part, or we have dealt with the critical aspect of digitization?
I think we have dealt with the critical part. I think the first thing was to lay the infrastructure, determine the structure, how this is going to be done, and that was already done. I think what is now, a lot of what is pending is cleaning. That 30% is cleaning and bringing on board, that which has not come into the digital space, or rather in the automated registry. But that, they said, is progressing. So the critical part is already sorted. There is a structure through which, if we find a parcel of land, how do we automate it? how do we do, the searches? That has been done. So the 70% has covered the most critical part. Yes.
And when you look at the industry regulator, and we are talking about the estate agent regulatory body, it has been there since 1987. And in the last 10 years, we have seen an explosion of estate managers. And so, from a regulatory point of view, do you believe that this industry is well regulated, or there are some needs for changes in regulatory reforms?
Brian, I'll want to be careful, criticizing the body that regulates me. But facts
it's not a question of criticizing. It's just a question of, painting the picture as it is, right. White and black.
Facts of the matter is there are a lot out there, people who call themselves agents, briefcase agents, some who have offices that are doing the work that an estate agent needs to do, and are not registered by the board. The board publishes, the names of agents every year. Those agents that the board is aware of, the board has proper documentation about those agents. So there are issues in the transaction in the industry, then they can follow up. There needs to be a lot of work done by the board, and as you've said, the last 10 years there have been that. But I also tell you that within the same 10 years, I think the board has worked tirelessly towards bringing on board and to account all who call themselves agents. But a lot more needs to happen. A lot more in terms of ensuring that everybody who calls themselves agent, everybody who interact with transactions regarding real estate is registered by the board. And the process is easy. The qualifications are not as high. But there's still people out there who haven't seen the need. I'll tell you, possibly the board needs to be strengthened, more facilitated by the relevant ministry, so that then we can achieve 100% in terms of the regulation. Yes.
Let's talk about a strengthening of the board. Which areas do you feel there is serious need of strengthening?
Looking at the structure of the board and the way it is constituted, we only have, I think, one office. There is a need for the board to spread its arms. How
that office is based here in Nairobi, at the National Titling Center.
Well, it's at the Survey of Kenya. How well that can be distributed into other counties, because real estate transactions are happening in every county. So we need to have proper regional offices, and not just physical offices, but with staff that can be able to go to the very inner of the estates, to go to the registry and ensure that everybody who do a transaction in regards to land or property is registered. So I think in terms of spreading its arms, enhancing its human resource, because I'll tell you the law is there and how to deal with them that are not registered and are dealing with the real estate sector. But who gets to know that this person is not? And unless we have members of the board present in every county, in every registry, then that might be, a tall order. Yes.
Again, when you talk about, capacitating the EARB, what aspect of the board should be capacitated?
The regulatory itself, do we call it the inspection arm of it? An arm that will ensure that it brings to account everybody who does the transaction, physically present in the counties, in the registry offices, to ensure nobody brings a buyer and a seller together unless they are an agent. Nobody does, the aspect of rent collection and property management unless they are an agent. So that aspect of, I'll call it, inspection, physical inspection, needs to be strengthened. I do not think there's a gap in the legal framework in terms of how, the discipline that the penalties that should be there. I think that framework is there. But how capacitated, is a board in terms of inspecting, then who are these agents? Yes.
And when you look at this board, which is supposed to be the manager of estate managers in this country, with a staff of less than 100 people, and trying to manage an industry or regulate an industry that has more than 70,000 real estate managers, this is definitely bound to fail.
It is, and I am afraid, and I have expressed my fears. But I'll tell you, there are steps towards the right direction for even for the board. We have seen a lot of publicity by the board. We have seen a lot of activities by the board trying to ensure that they clean up this. But there's a long way to go. By the time the 100 members of staff, which you have mentioned, which I doubt that number is actually up to 100, regulating 70,000 and more in a sector that is both formal and informal, but that needs to be formal altogether. I think that is a tall order. I'll also tell you that the entry into becoming an agent has been made so simple that many people would find themselves there. I think other than the little qualifications, working in a real estate firm, having a diploma or so, it's a mere interview, and then you're declared an agent. While I agree that is the law, I think it needs to be tightened. A proper vetting needs to happen. A proper background check needs to happen, before one is registered as an agent. The measures of dealing with those unscrupulous who are not agents and dealing with the business of estate agents possibly also needs to be made tougher, so that then it sends a message to everyone who is not a registered agent to come to bring themselves to board, so that then they can be properly regulated. Yes.
And when you talk about instituting harsher penalties, like for example, if you are arrested practicing as an estate agent, without valid certificate from EARB, the penalty is 20,000 shillings?
Yes.
Isn't this a slap on the wrist, honestly?
Well, it is. It is. But that, talks a lot into what are even the entry levels of the same. Do I, just do a minimal level of education, then sit in an interview? Well, the assumption is that then 20,000, not many people can get the 20,000. That's the assumption. But I'll tell you, the volumes of money involved in transactions regarding land is a lot. And 20,000 really would just be a drop in the ocean. A lot needs to happen, in terms of enhancing these laws so that they become as punitive as possible, to ensure that anybody dealing with land and and estate per se, then is very, very careful not to go wrong. Is very, very careful not to do it unless they are certified to do that. Yes.
You see, when you look at the estate agent board of the UK, where Kenya borrows a lot of its management as well as practice, it works closely with estate managers to weed out quacks in the industry, to weed out people that are not qualified to be estate managers. Do we have such a collaboration here in Kenya?
Little or no, Brian, has happened in terms of ensuring that those who are estate managers then are responsible enough to report others who are not. But I think, and that's a challenge to me as an estate agent and to others who are registered. That's a challenge to us. But then we need to help the board, in terms of policing and ensuring that we report those who are not. I mean, bottom line, anybody who is dealing with any document regarding land, any transaction, so to speak, anybody should ask them whether it is a financial institution, whether it is the police, whether it is a landlord, whether it's a property owner. Anybody should ask them, are you certified? When the landlord is paying a commission, for instance, for an agent bringing a seller on board, the first thing you should ask for, are you registered with the board? Mm-hmm. Where is your certificate? Before I pay you the commission, where is the certificate? The banking industry, for instance, should also, when money gets into my account and I see these are proceeds of agency that I helped so X sell land to Y, the first thing you should ask for is, are you certified? Are you registered with the board? And if you're not, then we start policing and weeding out those that are not registered. Mm-hmm. Yes.
And I like the fact that you're bringing in that, it should be a multi-sectoral approach whereby, you have land sellers and estates owners, you have banks, all of us, we should come together and ensure that we have the right people doing the right thing in the estate management industry. So why is it not happening?
Well, it isn't rocket science doing it. Why is it not happening? I think many Kenyans do not have the goodwill to do it. And many of the Kenyans who possibly have lost money in the transactions have opted to keep silent, which is not a good thing. So we need to have responsible citizens, and all of us needs to participate. Maybe the ERB needs to come up with incentives. Mm-hmm. If I report you've dealt with land transaction and you're not registered, what is the incentive? What is the incentive? What do I get? What protection do I get in return? Because I'll tell you, some of the people dealing with land transactions are possibly wealthy, and large amounts of money are involved. And Kenyans also, the sellers and the buyers, need to take time. Land transactions should not be hurried. I shouldn't meet you today and tomorrow I'm paying you for a piece of land. It needs not be hurried, so that I do the due diligence in regards to who are the people I'm dealing with. Are you the right landowner? Do I have the resources? The person bring the two of us together. Mm-hmm. Are they registered with the relevant authorities, in this case ERB? So we shouldn't really hurry. So it's a question of, are we responsible citizens, all of us, towards bringing sanity in the sector?
Mm-hmm. Yes. Out of the more than 70,000 estate managers that we have in this country, through your estimation, how many do you think, are legally certified?
Brian, I haven't checked on the list, but it's there, released by the board, and it's released every year. But it doesn't get to that number. It doesn't get to those tens of thousands. It doesn't. So possibly just about half of that. Are properly registered. I will tell you, people have companies and are not registered, and they are dealing with land transactions, and that is not right. Mm-hmm. That is not right.
And that is quite sad, because you see, when you look at other industries, like for example, the pharmacies and the Pharmacies and Poisons Board, for you to certify that this pharmacy or this pharmacist is registered with the relevant authorities, then they have QR codes. You can send an SMS number to a certain questioning, and you get instant response. The same thing happens with the Bureau of Standards, whereby if I am doubting that, this, cap is fake or it's genuine. I just need to scan the QR code and I'll be able to know whether this is genuine or this is a fake product. So how comes the agency has not taken up this kind of an initiative?
It possibly is coming up. It possibly is coming. I don't want to speak on behalf of the board because I'm not a member of the board.
But the beauty of it is that you're in this industry and you interact with the board.
I am.
And these are some of the questions that...
Yeah, I think there's need and dire need to do infusion of certain technology aspects, technological aspects into the board in ensuring that someone can ask me what my number is, registration number is, check with my national identity card, possibly look at my face and see my image and correlate the two. The three. That has not happened. But I agree with you totally that needs to happen. But also maybe possibly also mentioning that even where it is happening, even among the pharmacists and doctors, there are still quacks.
You still have some quacks involved.
But at least there are efforts towards clearing it and cleaning it. And technology ought to play a big role by, cleaning this industry, our industry. And ARB, as you've mentioned, the ARB needs to bring that technology into the sector. That hasn't happened yet. That hasn't happened. If I produce a certificate, you will have to do a lot of work, to ensure that that certificate is actually true. You'll have to possibly go to the registry or go to the data that is published by ARB. But instantly, you may not tell. That may be too late because the deal I have presented on the table for you might be too sweet. You are a seller. I have brought a buyer. So before you check whether my credentials are okay, you would want to finish this transaction. Yeah.
And so this is a wake-up call, to EARB, to deploy technology, in some of its processes. Like, for example, the process of authenticating a property manager, whether they are registered or not. And talking about technology, so much is now changing because of the Internet of Things, data analytics, artificial intelligence. How has this impacted the property management? If we look at the larger real estate, possibly then zero in on property management, technology has been adopted. It continues. Our industry is quite dynamic, and a lot of new technologies are coming up day by day. So it has really impacted in the sense that there has been an uptick of technology in the industry. Just talking about the plain ones. Today, if you are selling a property, then you do what they call digital marketing. That is technology. Going to social media, doing email marketing and such. That is technology, as compared to putting a board somewhere in a property and saying this property is on sale. So yes, it has come. When we talk of virtual tours in properties, so that a buyer is able to tour a property on looking at a video of a property and is able to walk through all the rooms in a property. That is technology. But there are even deeper aspects of technology. Is this happening in Kenya?
It is happening. It is happening in Kenya. Virtual tours are happening in Kenya. Yes.
But in a country whereby the integrity of our buildings has always been into question, is that a good route to pursue?
Technology? Well, it is. It is, because it is also the same technology that looks at the integrity of structures, for instance. So it is a good route to pursue. Infusion of technology in any sector, ours included, is a good thing to do, and that needs to happen pretty fast. That is the only way. Then we'll make the processes shorter, more efficient, more transparent. What ADISASA is doing, for instance, is adoption of technology into making sure that the transactions in the real estate are proper, transparent, above board, to ensure that nobody loses their money. Yes.
And how are you working around the automated valuation processes?
I said the virtual tour is one of it, but I don't need to come into this room to know how it looks like. Today there are those technologies. I mean, when you see a drone, for instance, touring a property, that is part of getting the data that I will need to say this is the value I place on this property. Data analytics, there are tools, digital tools that does a lot of data analytics. And this possibly would be more useful to lenders, to financial institutions. So they look at this area and they can pick Nairobi, a portion of Nairobi, and say this is the data we have for properties in Nairobi. This building was costed this, the other. So we employ a tool, which is technology. And then we are able to tell, then this other property, which has these features similar to this, that was put up this year, would possibly also be valued this much. Yeah.
I have also seen proposals by tax experts saying that, as part of broadening our tax base, the Kenya Revenue Authority should work with estate managers and property managers to identify landowners and property owners who are not paying taxes. Do you think this is also a way of broadening the tax base? And can this kind of collaboration work?
This can work and is working. Many firms that are registered to do property management are also registered with KRA as agents. So we have a lot of data for who the landlords are, and it is in black and white. So that collaboration needs to happen. How KRA handles that, I am not very sure, but that collaboration needs to happen to ensure that a responsible Kenyan, any responsible Kenyan, then pays their taxes that are due. But I'll tell you, it is there. It is there. Those firms that are agents to KRA and are also property managers have that data. And many of the landlords, I'll tell you, do not have a problem paying taxes. Many of them, only that they haven't been reached out. And Kenyans, being Kenyans, they wouldn't volunteer to, the information to KRA, but they do not have a problem paying taxes. Yes.
And also talking about technology, when you look at, the smart home technology, which is now becoming quite rampant, whereby, I can just check to see what is happening in my house when I'm still seated here. I can put lights off in my house when I'm seated here. How widespread is this technology in the industry?
Not a lot, but it's happening. A certain class, has adopted it. Of course, this also depends with the value you place on your property. If you value it that much, then you will employ such. And those aspects of when the door is opened and closed, I get an alert on my phone that it has been opened, it has been locked. There are, CCTV, for instance, in the house, so I can see who has opened, who has locked. Lighting, water meters, power meters, those are there. The uptick is not as fast. But I'll tell you, among certain areas of estates, where people have placed good value on their properties, that is happening. Of course, that is more on residentials. You will find also in commercials certain tenants putting such technologies for their offices. But in many buildings, if you walk around Nairobi, you will also find CCTV, monitoring, and that is part of what would be categorized as smart homes. Yes.
Let's also talk about infrastructure development, especially here in Kenya. and you know, infrastructural development, you know, has a lot of impact on your industry, because this would dictate how much you know, a tenant is expected to pay for the houses they are living in, the value of the land, and the accessibility, and so on. And we have seen a lot of development, especially around the road subsector. Has this managed to change the way the business is done in your industry?
Well, yes, Brian. That is the traditional, you know, way that we have always looked at property. You know, thinking about location and the infrastructure development around it. It still is important. I would want to own a plot of land that is near the road network, near power, near water, you know, near security and all that. Although the same now is changing, I mean, the concept of where I want to live is different. I mean, people work in Nairobi and live in Mombasa. You know, with the coming in of faster ways of transport, people would work in Naivasha, I mean, in Naivasha and live in Nairobi. I mean, people would work in Nyeri and I mean, people would work in Nairobi and live in Nyeri. So the load networks, of course, has helped. So that, in a number of years to come, when we see a lot of, you know, this improved infrastructure coming, the definition of location might change. I mean, people are now comfortably living in Syokimau. You know, a few years ago, before the superhighway came into place, before the train networks was proper, you would be afraid of living in Syokimau because it would possibly take you 3 hours to get to Nairobi. Today, you live comfortably in Syokimau, and you know, and you're in Nairobi, you know, in a matter of minutes, because the infrastructure is well improved. So slowly by slowly, we are becoming a village, even as a country, that people can live in any corner and be able to commute freely and do business and transact in others. So the traditional way of thinking what is a location is changing, however slowly. Yes.
Is there anything that, as an industry, you believe should be done to unlock the full potential of this industry, and of course to help it grow going forward?
Well, not one. A lot needs to happen. I think the government needs to play its role properly. In terms of the regulation, and when I say government, I say the bodies that are regulating the sector.
And how many are these? You have ARB?
We have ISK, ARB, but it is also multi-sectoral. I mean, when you talk of law enforcers, the police, I mean, it's part of what a body is in terms of regulating the industry. So that needs to happen properly. I mean, the aspect of digitalization needs to be completed, needs to be finished, so that we have people in the diaspora buying properties in Kenya. They are able to do a search and really confirm that this is the right property, and the transactions around it are 1 to 3 for the last how many years before they own. So the aspect of digitalization is very, very, very key for our industry, extremely key. So once we have the right people, so ARB and ISK have done their bit, we have the right people, we have the right technology, I think the rest, you know, will just be add-ons. You know, how much the economy grows and we have the power to purchase, those will be add-ons. Yes.
And how comes, you know, we haven't seen or heard, you know, the industry speaking in one voice? You know, if you look at the banking industry, you have the Kenya Bankers Association, you know, who coalesce together to speak in one voice and ensure that their agenda, you know, is taken on board. SACCOs, they have the same. How comes we are yet to see property managers, you know, coming together and speaking in one voice and addressing the challenges that the industry is facing?
I think we have. Only that possibly we have grown and we intend to grow, and technology has really impacted on us. I think we have. If you look at the addresses made by ISK, speaking about the digitalization processes and the challenges, the land transactions are facing because of that. That is one voice.
But ISK speaks on behalf of surveyors.
Well, ISK has 8 disciplines in it. Valuers are included. In fact, even property managers are included. Just a few months ago, there was an outcry that this digitalization of land sector in Nairobi is too slow, even for banks to perform. And I'll tell you what, banks relies on valuers, for transacting on land. And it is within the dictates that they have to rely on valuers, to value land, then they communicate to the bank. So I think we are speaking in one voice. Our voice has not been, so put together and so much recognized, but we are headed there. ERB today speaks, and you have seen some of their communication they have done on newspapers, and it makes sense. ISK the same, it speaks and makes sense. So we are coming together. We may not be as strong as a few other sectors. I'll tell you, it's just a matter of time.
It's just a matter of time.
Just a matter of time.
What is the future of this industry?
The future is bright, very, very bright. As I said, land is a very key factor in production. So whatever happens with land, whether we do a property, whether we farm, whether we, do a forest, whatever happens on land dictates a lot, in the production arena. So the future is bright, very, very bright. We can only see a boom in the industry happening with the tight regulations that are coming up. I'll tell you, the industry is growing. I'll also tell you, Brian, when you find so many agents, wanting to come on board or even doing the transaction, it means that the industry is lucrative. This is an industry you cannot run away with. It is something you would want to be associated with. It means there is a future, and a proper future. When you see land sellers, for instance, appealing so much to the diaspora, it means there is something in land. There is something in the sector that has to offer. And when you see the government put a lot of efforts in digitalizing this sector, then I'll tell you the future is bright.
And when you're talking about the future, and this is now becoming a major concern, we have seen a situation whereby, land subdivision in this country, is reaching, boiling point, whereby people have subdivided land to a point whereby it's almost becoming useless. You have places where you're seeing people selling 80 by 30, 80 by 20. And this is, of course, going to have a major impact on the value and productivity of land going forward. As an industry, how best do you think this can be dealt with?
I am sure the function of land surveying has a voice in it. And you have seen it being practiced before, where the government pronounces itself and says we can't go beyond this. And as a country and as citizens, we need to see the future of this country and value land, and say, look, this is agricultural land. There is no commercialization in terms of putting properties on it. And that is very key, because how well we manage the little land we have, the land that is not growing, with a population that is growing rapidly, how well we manage it determines how productive you are going to be in the near future. And so I hear you, and it is very key. Some counties have it, and they have said that within a certain radius of a certain town or a certain urban development, there can only be this much division. After that, this is a division. But it needs to be a real policy adopted by the government and the county government that this and that needs to happen. Because looking at the way the trend is, it might be tough for us moving in the future if we do not take care of the agricultural land If we do not take care of that, well, then we will see grazing in town. I mean, we will see livestock in town.
And actually, it is happening. You know, you drive around town and you see, you know, hundreds of cows, you know, roaming around town.
That's an issue and speaks a lot into how well we're managing our land. I mean, what policy is in place? How well are we managing it? How strict are we in terms of managing? How responsible are we as citizens? And how strong a voice do we have as professionals, whether in ARB or ISK, to speak against some of this and to advise the government in terms of policy formulation? And so I agree with you. This needs to happen sooner rather than later. Yeah.
And before I let you go, what are two things that are going to define, you know, property management and real estate management in this country going forward?
I think the first one is technology. The adoption of technology, infusing technology in property management is going to be very, very, very key. I mean, so many landlords, O'Brien, nowadays can collect their rent, for instance. How efficient is questionable. How about we bring in technology in running it? How about we bring technology in running the facilities of the property? How about we bring technology in terms of land registry and such? So technology is going to be very key. How fast we adopt it is going to help us, really, really going to help us. Any property management firm, any dealer in the real estate sector should look out, you know, what, you know, technology to adopt. And they are there. Those technologies are there. I think that's number one. I think number two, other than, you know, referring to the government and blaming the government for this and that, the citizens need to be responsible. The people doing transactions in the real estate need to be responsible. And as a country, as citizens, we need to change our attitude and our culture towards land, towards how we deal with land. I do not want to sell land if I'm not registered as a real agent. I would want to contact whoever is registered. I do not want to buy if the person I'm dealing with is not registered. The bank will not honor transactions that are done by people that are not registered by the bodies. So those two are going to be very defining moving forward.
Very good. Nhashan, thank you very much indeed for joining us on BizCheck this morning to help us with your insight on where the industry is, the property management, and where it's going and how it's going to be defined in the future. Your time is highly appreciated.
Thank you for having me.
Very good. Nhashan Kuri is the CEO of NW Realite, joining us this morning to put into perspective the issues around estate management and property management in this country. And of course, you have heard it from him. You know, I told you when we were starting that on this show, we're going to look at the issues of diaspora. It is becoming a critical cog in economic development. But how do we harness the power of the African diaspora? You're watching BizCheck. We're live from Broadcasting House. A short break is well deserved, and thereafter we'll be back with more conversation. Stay right here.